Greetings and felicitations, my friends. Welcome back to you all. My name's Peter. I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and I'm going through a journey of revisiting every Star Trek that I've ever watched in my lifetime before, which is every Star Trek that's ever been broadcast. We're going through the original series, and we're making good progress. Just a warning before we get into things, I will be getting into spoiler territory for the original series and possibly referencing content from some of the other Star Trek series as well. I'm not a reaction channel. I do have a recommendation that you go and watch bunnytailsREACTS, who has an excellent Star Trek reaction channel. I will link in the description to her review of the episode that we're going to be focusing on today, where I will deep dive into and share trivia with you about what are little girls made of. So we get started with an opening shot of the Enterprise remastered, looking glorious once again, and they are approaching a planet which looks quite cold. On the bridge we can see Kirk, who is in his standard gold uniform, and I miss the green wraparound tunic. I think in season 1 we only get to see this maybe one more time until it disappears and comes back looking slightly modified in season 2. Kirk is holding something in his hand. I'm not sure what it is. It's a piece of equipment. And he walks over to Nurse Christine Chapel. Big thumbs up to see Nurse Christine Chapel on the bridge. Kirk informs the nurse that we are entering orbit now, nurse, and that it won't be much longer that she has to wait. And we get some scene setting in the conversation that follows, where Kirk says that he understands that Christine gave up a career in bioresearch to sign aboard a starship. Christine is very preoccupied, and she replies to him, "I know he's alive down there, Captain." Kirk tries to be kind with his response here, but also firm. He says that it's been 5 years since his last message, to which Christine replies, "Roger is a very determined man. He'd find a way to live." So we are clearly, without any real context going into this for the first time here, we're getting an understanding that Christine has left somebody who she cared deeply about on this planet 5 years ago at least, and this is a person of extreme determination. So she's going into this with confidence that she's going to find her man down there and alive and well. Uhura chips in saying, "Beginning signals to the surface, sir." So they're trying to make contact with whoever's down there waiting. Kirk instructs her to put all frequencies onto this. Kirk walks over to Spock, who comments that ship's record banks show little that we don't already know about this planet. Gravity being 1.1 of Earth. We get a lovely shot of Spock with a screen behind him at the science station, which reveals to us that this planet name is EXO-3. That's EXO-3 in Roman numerals. Now, there's a lot of data about this planet on the screen, and we can't really read some of the small print, at least I can't anyway. If you've got better eyes than I do, then maybe you'll have a chance. The atmosphere is within safety limits, so there is a possibility that they can beam down, but Kirk then retorts, but the surface temperature of the planet is 100 degrees below zero, which is going to make things rather tricky. It may have been inhabited once, but the sun has been fading steadily for 500,000 years. Spock then switches his view screen to an image of a man who is Dr. Corby. We're told that this is Dr. Corby, who is the individual that Christine is referring to. Roger's a very determined man, so this is Dr. Roger Corby. The image shows this man wearing what appears to be one of the older style Starfleet uniforms in that ghastly salmon pinky color that I dislike so much. Spock comments here that Dr. Corby is often called the Pasteur of archaeological medicine. So this sets the scene very, very nicely that this is an individual of some renown, somebody who is very, very, very well qualified in his field, widely recognized as the expert in his field across the galaxy, presumably. And his translation of medical records from Orion ruins revolutionized immunization techniques. To which Kirk says, "All required reading at the Academy, Mr. Spock." Kirk seems like he's got a bit of a hero complex going on for Dr. Corby. He comments that he has always wanted to meet him, and then asks Spock, is there any chance of him still being alive down there? To which Spock doesn't actually offer a reply. He just offers a skeptical look and then turns back towards his station. Kirk returns to his command chair. Uhura has continued to try and reach the planet, but there's been no response just so far. Christine looks like she's getting a bit more concerned, and she comments by saying that Roger's last signal had told about finding underground caverns. And then Kirk offers the very sobering comments that since then, 2 expeditions have failed to find him. Christine looks resigned. Uhura continues to try, but all frequencies a second time have yielded no results. But wait, there is some static. Uhura is picking up a message, and a male voice comes on saying, Enterprise, come in, Enterprise. This is Roger Corby. Repeating, this is Dr. Roger Corby. Do you read me? Christine closes her eyes in an expression of relief, and we cut to the opening credits. After the opening credits, we get a glorious shot remastered of the Enterprise over the planet XO3, as we now know it is called, and we get the title of the episode on screen, What a Little Girl's Made Of. We also get a captain's log, in which Kirk reflects on the surprising communication that they have now received from Dr. Roger Corby. They're continuing to communicate with him as we cut back to the bridge, and Kirk relays to Corby that we have your landing coordinates prepared and we're preparing to beam down. As Kirk is about to relay to Dr. Corby that he has a surprise for him, someone that he will be interested in talking to, which is Christine, Kirk is cut off abruptly by Corby, who relays the unusual request to Kirk that would you please beam down here on your own, all by yourself. The reason for this is relayed by Corby that he's made such unusual discoveries down on the planet that it might require a quite extraordinary decision from the captain. Spock comes over to Jim and relays his immediate concern that this is an unusual request. Kirk retorts that the man relaying that request is Dr. Roger Corby. Spock asks Christine then, you're certain it's his voice? To which Christine replies, have you ever been engaged, Mr. Spock? Now I'm going to pause briefly there and comment on the fact that if you've seen Strange New Worlds, the latest episode that came out this week at the time of recording, that raises serious continuity errors from this episode to that. I'm not going to comment on that, but if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Kirk agrees to Corby's terms. He initiates communication again and says, agree to your terms, but there will be 2 of us. And then Christine says, hello, Roger, and Corby reacts with audible joy to hearing Christine's voice. We don't actually see him. We can only hear him on audio. He sounds a little taken aback, but they have a bit of a moment over the intercom, and off they go. Kirk and Christine exit the bridge. Spock sits down in the command chair, taking command. Christine and Uhura share an embrace. Uhura is quite clearly very, very happy for her friend Christine. And we cut to the transport room where we're getting ready to beam down to the planet. Kirk and Christine are immediately on the pad. An observation here that considering where they're going, they're not very warmly dressed, especially Christine, who is in her nurse's dress, for lack of a better description. The transporter chief energizes, and down to the planet they go. We cut to a snowy landscape, which is very, very real. So that is obviously some stock footage. And then we see Christine and Kirk arriving into this snowy landscape. And this is a very fake-looking snowy landscape behind them. It's quite obvious that they are on a stage here. They're at the doorway to the caverns. And Kirk immediately is concerned because he expected Corby to be waiting for them. I do really like the design of the caverns that we see here, though. I don't know if some of these have been remastered. I can't quite remember from the original unmastered episode, but I do like the visuals that we're getting here. It looks really good, but it's It's quite jarring to me that Kirk and Christine are not more warmly dressed for the occasion. Perhaps these caves have been heated, I don't know. Kirk shouts for Corby and thinks out loud that maybe we've been given the wrong entry point. Kirk flips out his communicator, signals the Enterprise. Spock answers him, and Kirk, worried, says, "Beam down 2 security men." Spock asks if there's any problems. Kirk says, "It's probably nothing, but we've experienced some delay in meeting us." Kirk sort of takes a few steps and comments that the corridors could be quite deep. Christine follows him. Christine's concerned, but Kirk tries to reassure her that as the corridors are quite deep, it may have taken them a bit longer to get there than anticipated. 2 security guards are beamed down. These are not instantly familiar faces to me in terms of the extras that we've got to know so far in this rewatch. Kirk immediately identifies one of them as Rayburn, who he orders to maintain post here. And then he addresses the other one as Matthews, and he instructs Matthews to accompany them as they will go and look for Dr. Corby. They start their journey through the caverns. They come to another doorway. Kirk is looking around. He signals Christine to follow, and still there is nothing. They go through more doorways, and we can see as they come through, there is a very, very sheer drop, and Christine nearly falls down it. Kirk has to pull her back just in time, and they continue to walk on, Kirk taking Christine by the hand. They go past another doorway, and then a bright light illuminates Kirk and Christine, and a man appears who is not immediately recognizable because the light is shining right on him, so we can only see him as a shadow. Kirk draws his Type 1 phaser. Christine looks excited, but she is held back by Kirk as a precaution. Matthews, security guy, gets his weapon ready as well. Kirk addresses the figure and says, "Is that you, Dr. Corby?" The figure presses a switch, and we can see the person in full view. Christine immediately recognizes this person and says, "It's Dr. Brown, it's Roger's assistant." And she is immediately relieved and feels safe and comfortable. But then we hear a man screaming, and they all turn and run back. And at the big drop that we've just seen moments ago, it is clear that Matthews has met an untimely end. And Dr. Brown assures him that there is no way that he could survive this and that he must have slipped. But then we cut to the appearance of a lurking figure in the background, and what an intimidating figure this is. This is a giant creature wearing long robes and has no hair, and is a very, very intimidating figure. I will have to check who played this creature, who we will come to learn is called Rook, because it wouldn't surprise me at all if Rook was some sort of bodybuilder or wrestler or something of that nature, so we'll check into that. Brown comments how unfortunate, how terribly unfortunate this is, and then tells Kirk that Dr. Corby was unavoidably detained and that he got there as soon as he could, to which Kirk replies, "But not soon enough." Christine then seems taken aback that Brown, or Brownie as she calls him, doesn't seem too pleased to see her. And she says, "Brownie, what, don't you recognize me?" And Brown comments, "Explain." And then he gets a smile on his face and says, "Christine, you look well," in a moment of delayed recognition. You can see here in Kirk's eyes that he is now immediately suspicious of what has happened here to his security officer, Matthews, but Brown assures him that he is dead. They continue going towards wherever it is Dr. Corby is, and Kirk seeks reassurance from Christine that you definitely recognize him, this is someone you know and that you trust. Kirk is immediately on his guard here, but continue they are about to do, but Kirk signals to Rayburn, who is at the entrance of the cavern, and asks for an update. Rayburn reports that all is quiet. Any problems down there? To which Kirk says, "We lost Matthews, apparently an accident." Rayburn looks a mixture of devastated and immediately on alert. Kirk tells him to remain on alert and to report in at hourly intervals. And should they lose contact, or if he fails to hear from either of us, he's to beam down a security party immediately. As all of this is going on, unfortunately, Rayburn meets the same fate that apparently Matthews did, as the imposing figure of Rook sneaks up behind him and takes him out. Brown, Christine, and Kirk continue to converse about some of the ethics and standards of Roger Corby and the party, and talk about the culture of XO3 and how they moved from light to darkness, and they replaced freedom with a mechanistic culture, which is something that will come into play, as we will see. And Dr. Corby has discovered elements of this culture that will revolutionize the universe. They enter a living area within the caverns with some automatic doors of an interesting shape, and then in walks a young female who is, to put it in the politest sense, very scantily dressed. And she identifies herself as Andrea, Dr. Corby's assistant. Christine looks taken aback at the appearance of this young female companion. It's clear that she did not know about Andrea, and she's really not happy to see her. And Andrea is warm and welcoming, saying, "You must be Christine and you must be Captain Kirk. We appreciate you bringing Roger's fiancé to him." And it's clear that she's familiar with Dr. Corby enough to refer to him as Roger. Christine immediately goes on the defensive, saying, "I don't remember Dr. Corby mentioning an Andrea." Andrea replies, "But you are exactly as Roger described you, and no wonder that he missed you so much." Corby then appears, Kirk inquiring where he is, to which Corby states, "Right here, Captain, I've been looking forward to this," and then he's cut off when he sees Christine, and they embrace after a long time being apart. Christine comments that she knew she would find him, and Roger reassures her that everything is all right now. Corby apologizes to Kirk and introduces himself, to which Kirk accepts his handshake and says, "No apology necessary and no need to introduce yourself." Brown relays to Corby that the captain lost a man, to which Corby says, "I'm so sorry, Captain, perhaps if I'd been there." Kirk then contacts Rayburn at the entrance and attempts to make a security check-in. Corby and Brown look concerned, and Corby asks Kirk, "I'd prefer if you waited." Kirk then says, "I've lost contact with my guard. I'm required to make contact with my ship," to which a voice then says, "No communication, Captain." And Brown has gone over and picked up phaser pistol, one of the original designs from the first pilots, and he's pointing it at Kirk. And Corby apologizes and says, "I'm sorry, but if they should send more people down." Christine protests and said, "He will not be harmed, but there are things that are so terribly important here that, unknown, if not handled properly, could affect things greatly." Roger instructs Andrea to go and take Kirk's Type 1 phaser from him, and she attempts to do so, but he grabs her, draws his phaser, does a Kirk sort of tumble, and in the process of things that follows, Brown appears as if he's about to shoot. Kirk shoots first and hits him, and at this exact moment, Rook enters the chamber, and he picks up Kirk and positions him up on the wall as if it's nothing to him. He has immense strength. And then we cut to a scene of Brown on the floor, and this is a big reveal, and that Brown is not human. We zoom in on a wound on his abdomen area, and we can see inside that he has circuitry. This is not a human being. This is an android of some kind. We cut to the next scene, which is another glorious shot of the Enterprise in orbit of the planet, and at the communications station, Uhura gets a call from the planet. It's Captain Kirk's voice signaling Enterprise from Captain Kirk. Uhura opens a frequency and Spock responds, "Spock here, Captain." Kirk relays that they've established contact with Dr. Corby. Spock expresses his concern since they'd not heard from him. The check-in was overdue. They'd not heard from the security team. We cut back to the planet and we see that it is actually not Kirk relaying this message. It is actually Rook, who can impersonate the voice of Kirk, at least, and presumably any other being. Although this sounds exactly like Kirk, what Rook is saying as Kirk alerts Spock to the fact that something doesn't feel right about this. And he comments, "Are you all right? You sound tired." Corby, in the meantime, warns Kirk not to cry out as Rook may injure him. They reopen the communications and Rook says all is fine, all under control, and stand by for regular contact, and ends the communication. Corby assures Kirk here that he has nothing to worry about. "You know my reputation. I just need you to go along with this and trust me." Kirk replies, "I know your reputation, what you're all about, what you stand for, and that's why all of this makes no sense." The fact that Kirk and Christine are now being detained here, and we are in the situation where we have a strange creature here. We have a young female here who Christine was not expecting to see, and we now have Dr. Brown, who has now been killed and is revealed not to be Dr. Brown at all, but actually an android. We then get an exchange where Corby instructs Rook to impersonate some other people, and he goes through the motions of speaking with Andrea's voice, saying, "You must be Captain Kirk of the Starship Enterprise." He then impersonates Corby, and then he goes on to impersonate Christine, which, importantly, Corby responds negatively to and says, "That's enough. You are not to mock Christine, and you are not to harm her." And then Kirk pitches in here with something very important. Kirk's being very clever here. Kirk chips in and said, "Or disobey an order from her," to which Corby goes along with, and he instructs Rook to never disobey an order from Christine. And then he says, "Satisfied, Captain Kirk, both love and trust." He then asks for 24 hours to convince him, to which Kirk says, "Do I need to be your prisoner to be convinced? What would your first duty be? To report? But how many discoveries have been lost because of layman's inability to interpret something so important and to panic?" Kirk then inquires about his other crewmen. Alive or dead, he wants to know. And then Corby calmly claims that Rook was programmed to protect his experiments and that his other crewman is dead. Rook destroyed them both, but totally against Corby's wishes, he tries to assure him. Kirk then inquires if Rook is an android, like Brown, and then Rook responds in his very deep voice, more complex than Brown, much superior, and that he was left there by the old ones. Corby then reveals that Rook was still tending the machinery here when we arrived, and that even Rook doesn't know how many centuries he's been doing so, but with Rook's help, he found records from which they built Brown. Kirk then tries to make a break for it, but he doesn't get very far. He aims for the door, but Rook picks him up and tosses him around like a rag doll. Corby asks him to back off, and then we cut to a scene where Andrea is entering a room and Christine is in there, looking very, very concerned. Andrea relays to Christine that she doesn't understand. Why should Christine be so unhappy? She's with Roger again. Christine protests, "Where is Captain Kirk?" And they go back and forth about Christine should trust Roger. And she then comments that, "Why does it bother you when I call him Roger?" But then Roger appears with Rook, who is holding Kirk by the arms. Roger relays to Andrea that it's enough that it does upset Christine, and that from now on she is to address him as Dr. Corby, to which Andrea replies, "Yes, Dr. Corby." Christine is starting to look very, very concerned at her fiancé here, and not at all happy with what is going on. It's then revealed that Andrea is also like Dr. Brown. She's also an android. Corby marvels in his work, his genius, the lifelike skin pigmentation, the flesh, the warmth, and that there's even a pulse, physical sensation, to which Christine quite rightly comments how convenient, because from her perspective, it must appear that, and I think there's every evidence that Christine didn't know who Andrea was. So I don't think Andrea was based on a real person like Dr. Brown was. I think basically Corby has made himself a woman from his own specifications based on no one. He tries to reassure her that I programmed her. She only does what I program her to do. But Christine quips back quite appropriately again that given a mechanical Dr. Brown, a mechanical geisha would be no more difficult. Corby retorts, "Do you think I could love a machine?" Corby says that Andrea is incapable of emotion. She just obeys orders. There's nothing emotional about it. To which Roger goes on to instruct Andrea to kiss Captain Kirk, which she does. Then he instructs her to slap him, which she does. And there is no emotion in this whatsoever. Corby then challenges Kirk, do you now not understand? Kirk is still indignant, but then says, why did Brown try to shoot me, and why did that thing kill 2 of my men? Corby assures him that he will answer all of his questions now. And we cut very abruptly to a scene of Rook bringing it's hard to describe what this is. It's like a mannequin, but it looks very rock-like. But it's definitely meant to be the form of a person. And we're in a different room. Corby enters with Christine. Andrea is getting ready to tend some machinery behind her, and she turns a red dial, which makes a very satisfying boop-a-doop noise. And Corby says, this is how you make an android. And we see this circular platform here, which on one side we have Kirk, who is now naked and strapped down, and the other side we have the form that Rook has put in place. Christine looks rightly horrified at the sight in front of her. Kirk is lying on the table, naked. He looks quite expressionless, but he's breathing quite heavily, it seems. And now this device to which Kirk and the humanoid type figure is strapped starts spinning slowly. Corby assures Christine that he will not be harmed, I promise. And the table starts to spin and spin and spin and gets faster and faster and faster. Christine's very, very upset. Roger, what's happened to you? When I sat in your class, you wouldn't dream of hurting a fly, an insect, or an animal. Life was sacred to you then. Roger says, if I'd simply beamed up to their vessel with Brown and the others, I'd have given them objects of curiosity, the beginnings of wild stories, foolish theories. The machine continues to spin round and round. It's getting faster and faster. Rook and Andrea are tending to the equipment in the background. And as the table spins faster and faster, we see that now there are 2 human beings on that table spinning round and around, and they look to be exactly the same. Whatever Rook put in place, that template, that mold or whatever it was, it's no longer there. It's now being replaced with a human figure, and the table starts to slow down very, very gradually until it comes to a full stop. And we get a shot from overhead revealing 2 William Shatners, 2 naked Captain James T. Kirks. Corby challenges Christine now, which is your captain? And she says, I don't know. They're exactly alike. I honestly don't know. Corby then says synthetic organs are in place. We merely synchronize them with Kirk's autonomic nervous system, duplicating the rhythms of his body. At the same time, we duplicate the mental patterns. So right now, it's just a physical copy of Kirk. Now they've got to make that mental pattern. Kirk picks up on this immediately. He looks over and thinking, interesting. This might be an opportunity for me to plant something. Corby comments that this android will be so perfect it could even replace the captain. He'll have the same memories, the same abilities. Kirk then says out loud to himself, mind your own business, Mr. Spock. I'm sick of your half-breed interference. Do you hear? And he repeats this phrase over and over again until electrical buzzing starts and he sort of screeches in pain. And the experience of the mental copying from his brain has obviously affected him. This continues for a few more seconds, and the android Kirk on the other side of the table begins to stir into life with a realization of who and where he is. Finally, it's over. Things are complete. And this has been a very, very powerful scene. Christine asks Kirk, are you all right? And Kirk replies, as far as I know. Roger then says, now meet an android, and the table spins round to reveal the other Kirk, the android Kirk, and he looks over with a bit of a creepy-looking smile on his face, actually, and addresses her and says, how do you do, Miss Chapel? We then cut to another scene, quite abruptly again, and Andrea is in the living quarters with some very nice dining table and chairs, and she's preparing some very, very typical Star Trek food, which is placed on the table. Christine enters, and she sits down, and Andrea says to her, I'm now programmed to please you. Is the food appealing to you? And Christine says, yes, it is, and I thank you. And in walks what may or may not be Captain Kirk, fully clothed in his regular uniform again. And Andrea says, please sit, Captain, to which Kirk responds, thank you, I'm more or less on parole, I understand. Now, this immediately is a red flag to me. It's obvious to me that the freedom that Kirk is afforded here, not being guarded, and the way he's left to talk with Christine here, it's very, very obvious to me straight away that this is not the real Kirk. This is actually the android. But they engage in conversation with Andrea just in the distance, and Christine sharing her concern with what she thinks is her captain. But despite everything that has occurred here, whatever he seems to be doing, there must be a reason for it. This is her fiancé, this is Roger, and that he's as sane as you or I. Kirk then says, if I give you a direct order to betray him, Christine cuts him off and says, please don't ask me to make that choice. I'd rather you push me off that same precipice where Matthews died. And this is a powerful statement from Christine, which I really like, and this shows what she... the strength of the feeling that she has for Roger. And she pushes the plate away and says, oh, I can't. You go ahead and eat. And Kirk does the same, pushes his food away and says, androids don't eat, Miss Chapel. And in walks Corby, and in walks our real Kirk. And Kirk is now dressed in the same sort of coveralls that Corby and Andrea and the late Brown were wearing. Ruck is behind them. And Corby comments that he even has your sense of humour. Christine acts surprised and a little upset. And we get this scene, which is a really, really nice, for the time. I want to comment how much I love this scene in terms of the practical effects, where we get William Shatner sat next to William Shatner. This split screen, even before the remastered versions of this episode, is really, really good. Real Kirk says, well, there's a difference between us at least. I'm hungry, to which the android replies, the difference is your weakness, Captain, not mine. Kirk replies to him, eating is a pleasure, unfortunately one you will never know. The android Kirk replies, perhaps, but then I will never starve. Kirk asks Roger, he's an exact duplicate. And then he challenges him, says, what about memory? Tell me about Sam. The android doesn't hesitate and responds, George Samuel Kirk, your brother, only you call him Sam, which if you watched Strange New Worlds, you will know comes to be not the truth. It's also mentioned here by the android and Kirk. They discuss the fact that George, or Sam, saw Kirk off on this mission, to which the android agrees and says, yes, that's correct, with his wife and 3 sons, which will come to be interesting in later times. Kirk then says to the android, in a bit of a test, he said he was being transferred to Earth Colony 2 Research Station, to which the android corrects him, saying he was continuing his research and that he wanted to be transferred to Earth Colony 2. So you can see here that this android literally is Kirk. He has all of his physical attributes, he has all of his mental faculties and all of his memories. Roger then goes on to say to the android, you may leave now. And it's clear that this Kirk, the android Kirk, is going to be sent up to the Enterprise, which is an interesting development. Roger then challenges Kirk and Christine that they haven't even guessed the rest, and that what you saw here was only a machine, only half of what I could have accomplished. What I could have done was actually, by continuing the process, he could have transferred Kirk's actual consciousness into that android, giving Kirk an android body, even his soul, if he wishes, into that android body, giving practical immortality. And that is the extent of what Corby has discovered and what he wants to protect here. Kirk protests that this is along the lines of Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, Ferrus and Maltuvius, who I think may be fictional because they are not names familiar to me. Corby goes on to wax lyrical about how human condition could be improved. Kirk says it would also eliminate tenderness, sentiment, kindness. But Corby retorts, no one will ever need to die again, no disease, no deformities. Even fear can be programmed away and replaced with joy. Offering you a practical heaven, he says to Kirk, a new paradise, and all I need is your help. Kirk continues the conversation as a distraction, as he realizes that the wooden chair he is sitting on has some rope tied around it, and he starts to discreetly undo that rope. Roger then goes on to say he's going to begin producing androids selectively and carefully and introduce them into human society, and that they must be strongly integrated into that society before their existence is revealed, so there is no wave of hysteria. Corby says, I wanted to impress you. That's all. Kirk replies, I'm impressed, but not the way you think. And then he jumps up. He's got this rope loose and he puts it around Corby's neck, holds Corby hostage. Ruck is hovering, but realizes there's not much he can do just yet. Kirk starts to move towards the door, and out he goes, and then he dumps Corby and runs. Ruck tends to Corby, removes the rope from around his neck. Kirk runs through the caverns. Corby instructs Ruck as he's coughing. He says, Ruck, protect. Christine comes out looking very concerned and says, "Roger, what are you doing?" Because I think we all can infer what protect means. I think Ruk is under instructions to kill Kirk. Kirk continues to run through the caverns. Christine then chases after Ruk and Kirk, and she shouts, "Ruk, no! Dr. Corby instructed you to obey me. Stop!" Kirk enters a room which is fairly recognizable, actually. I believe they came this way on the way in. And he hides around behind a wall, and he manages to pull off a very unfortunate looking piece of rock, which looks like something quite rude, if I'm honest. But he pulls this piece of rock off and holds it in his hands, and he's intending to use it as a weapon. Concealed from his view, Ruk enters the scene, but he can't see Kirk because he's behind this wall. Ruk, hearing the crack of the rock being severed from its position, he calls out cleverly using Christine's voice, saying, "Captain Kirk, let me help you." Kirk's not sure at first, but just as Ruk is about to leave, giving up this area as a possible location for Kirk, Kirk replies, "Christine, is that you?" Ruk immediately turns around, sensing he has his prey, and he starts approaching Kirk hidden behind the wall. Ruk's getting closer and closer, and it's actually quite a scary scene. Kirk realizes Ruk is close, and he tries to strike him with the rock. Ruk effortlessly disarms him, and Kirk falls off the ledge where earlier Rayburn had died. He struggles to get his footing, but then Ruk, remembering presumably the instructions that Christine had given him, which he had heard, "Captain Kirk, Dr. Corby said you should obey me," he pulls up Kirk and saves him from plummeting to his death. So with Kirk's escape attempt failed, we cut to the Enterprise. On board the Enterprise, Kirk, or the android Kirk as we know him to be, appears from the turbo lift. Spock just happens to be working by a Jeffries tube as Kirk walks past him and enters his quarters. Spock calls out, "Captain." He follows Kirk into his quarters. Again, can anyone just walk into anyone's quarters? And he challenges Kirk. "Captain, you finished ahead of schedule." Android Kirk replies, "Dr. Corby has considerable cargo. I'll have to go over our destination schedule with him." Kirk says, "You're going back down with your command packet," in an act of questioning Kirk's authority here, to which Android Kirk replies, "Mind your own business, Mr. Spock. I'm sick of your half-breed interference. Do you hear?" Spock looks as puzzled as a Vulcan can look, but he replies, "Yes, very well, Captain." Android Kirk says, "You look upset, Mr. Spock. Is everything okay?" Spock replies, "No problems here." "Good," replies Kirk. "I'll beam up shortly with Dr. Corby and party." We then get a scene of Kirk walking through the corridors. This is a scene from an earlier episode, I think possibly The Man Trap, because I remember that guy in red with the high collar. Spock immediately is suspicious that something is wrong here, though. Spock is still in Kirk's quarters at this point, and he presses the intercom and says, "Security, Spock here. Status of your landing party. Ready and standing by," says a voice on the other end. Spock says, "Have them meet me in the transporter room after the captain has beamed down." So Spock knows something is amiss here, and he has done for some time, I think. And if he was ever in any doubt, the reaction he's just received from Kirk, this is key here, and I really like this, that the real Kirk has successfully planted this reaction into Android Kirk, but that reaction is off. Real Kirk knew this, and Spock has immediately picked up on it. Android Kirk did not think anything was amiss with this, and notices Spock's surprised reaction and challenges Spock on it. "Everything okay, despite the fact that I've basically called you a half-breed and I'm sick and tired of you interfering, despite the fact that you are my trusted first officer and my friend." So, yeah, very, very good stuff indeed, and I really appreciated that. Back on the planet, Android Kirk has returned, and he's conversing with Corby, saying, "I think you'll find planet Midos 5 an excellent choice." So it's clear that Corby is planning to set up a small colony, and this colony has abundant raw materials, and he comments to Android Kirk that, "You've made a good beginning, Captain." Android Kirk says, "I felt quite at home on the Enterprise." We cut to a scene of Kirk lying on his bed in his quarters where he's being held. In walks Andrea to pick up his tray of food. Kirk challenges Andrea, and surprise, surprise, he says, "Kiss me," to which she happily obliges. She then goes to strike him, but Kirk prevents her from doing so, and he holds her and kisses her again. He's holding her very, very tightly, because when he lets go, you can actually see his finger marks on her upper arms as he removes them. As he pulls her in for another embrace, Andrea seems to give up and seems to begin to respond to it, but then pulls away and says, "No, not programmed for you," which is key. This is very, very interesting indeed, that she says, "Not programmed for you." It's clear from that statement that she was programmed for Roger, and to me, that indicates that she was programmed for Roger in all ways, including physical intimacy. Andrea leaves with the tray looking very uncomfortable. Kirk tries to exit his quarters, but he is stopped by Rook at the door, who pushes him down. Kirk challenges Rook and says, "You're showing emotion. You disapprove of Miss Chapel's orders to save my life." Rook replies that to maintain Kirk's existence would be illogical. Kirk asks him why. "Can't your memory bank solve a simple equation like that?" Kirk is in good form here, and he goes on to ask him, "What happened to the old ones, Rook?" Rook looks disturbed, and he recalls so long ago. Kirk says, "Is it possible they built their machines too well? That the old ones gave their machines pride and a desire to survive? Machines that wanted logic and order and found themselves frustrated by the illogical emotional behavior of the old ones, the ones who made us," says Rook. When he comes into the conversation, "They grew fearful of us. They began to turn us off." Kirk then says, "Isn't it Corby now who's creating that same danger to you all over again?" We get a close-up of Kirk here, and it's the second time in the original series that we see a flipped-over version of Kirk. He's definitely, this image is reversed because his hair is part of the other way. And even if it weren't, he looks wrong anyway. You can tell by people's eyes when people are reversed. Kirk goes on, though, to say, "Unlike you, we humans are full of unpredictable emotions that logic cannot solve." And Rook agrees, yes, it's been so long ago that I'd forgotten all this. The old ones here, the ones who made us, it's still in my memory banks, Rook goes on to say. It became necessary to destroy them. "You are inconsistent. You cannot be programmed," he says to Kirk. "You're inferior." Kirk then says, "What about Corby?" Rook said, "You came from the outside. You bring disorder here." Kirk challenges him. "The danger is Corby." Rook says, "I was programmed by Corby. I cannot kill him." Kirk says, "The old ones programmed you too, but it became possible to destroy them." Rook then seems to have a moment of realization. That was the equation. He picks up Kirk as he was nothing, not so much picking him up as squashing him. He goes on to say, as he's doing so, "Survival must cancel out programming." Kirk encourages him. "That's it, logic. You can't protect someone who's trying to destroy you." In walks Corby and says, "Rook, I would like..." And then Rook throws Kirk aside and he challenges Corby. He says, "You brought him among us. You brought the inferior ones. We had cleansed ourselves of them, but now you bring the evil back to us." Corby says, "Rook, stop." And he reaches into his pocket, realizing the danger. Says, "Rook, you're programming." But it's too late. Rook doesn't back down. Corby gets out Kirk's phaser from his pocket and he destroys Rook. Kirk looks defeated. Corby comes over to Kirk and said, "I had no choice." Kirk looks at him and nods in realization. Corby then beckons Kirk to the door where Christine is standing, and they walk through the caverns. Kirk goes on. He's not giving up here. He says, "You were a man of respect." And then he goes to challenge Corby again as they walk through the door. Corby pushes Kirk off, punches him, and then we get the big reveal. A bit of skin comes away from Corby's hand, revealing circuitry. He, too, is an android. Kirk moves in to try and challenge him, but Corby holds him off with the phaser. Christine looks absolutely astonished, but Corby assures her, "It's me, Christine, Roger. It really is still me. I'm in here." And recall earlier he said he could transform or transfer the consciousness to an android body. He goes on to relay that, "You couldn't imagine how it was here, Christine. I was frozen, dying, my legs were gone. I only had my brain between my life and my death." Christine says emotionally, "Is that you, Roger?" Roger says, "This can be repaired easier than another man can set a broken finger. I'm still the same as I was before, Christine. Perhaps even better." We hear an alarm buzzing, and Corby answers. He says, "Andrea." She replies, "Yes, Doctor." He tells her there's someone at the outer junction. Kirk says to Christine, "Spock, he must have got my message." Andrea says, "I'll find Rook." But Corby says, "Rook has been deactivated. Get a weapon, go and protect." And she does. She reaches and she retrieves the original pilot phaser pistol that Brown had held earlier. She exits and she sees Android Kirk there, to which she approaches him and says, "I will kiss you." The android says, "No, you will not. It is illogical." At which point, she fires the phaser and destroys the android Kirk. In she walks, though, and she goes on to explain what she's just done, actually. She says, freed himself and I destroyed, and then she looks puzzled when she sees the real Kirk, and ends her sentence, destroyed him. Kirk then relays the obvious, that she killed the android Kirk, Corby. Your flawless beings are killing off one another. Aren't you doing exactly what you hate most in humans, killing with no more concern than turning off a light? Corby retorts, I am not a computer. Test me. I am Roger Corby. But he then gets looks in his face, even starting to doubt himself. And at this point, he starts becoming almost incoherent. But he continues, Christine, let me just prove myself. Does this make a difference? Holding up his hand with his exposed circuitry. Christine says, don't you see, Roger? Everything you've done has proved that it isn't you. It isn't you at all. And he responds again, I am Roger Corby. Kirk then says, prove it. Give me that phaser gun. If there's any human left in you at all, give it to me. Corby says, no, you will never understand. I constructed a perfect being, tested it, proved it. But finally, he relents, and he gives the hand phaser to Kirk. Kirk immediately points it at Andrea, says, Andrea, give me the weapon. She responds by turning and facing him with her weapon and says, no, protect. But then she turns and she starts to approach Roger, and she goes over and says, you, to love you, to kiss you. Android Roger, as we now know him to be, says, no, you cannot love. You're not human. But Andrea doesn't relent. She repeats, love you, kiss you. And as she does lean in to kiss him, Roger, I think it is, and I'm only just realizing this because I'd always imagined it was Andrea, but I think it's actually Roger. I'm actually learning something new here, changing my perception. It's obviously Roger who grabs hold of the phaser pistol that Andrea is holding, and he presses it to fire and vaporizes them both. Christine collapses, very, very upset, and we hear the voice of Spock in the background shouting, Captain Kirk. Kirk goes to the door, which it opens, and says, in here, Spock. Spock walks in, tricorder on him, phaser in hand, security team behind him. He says, Captain, where's Dr. Corby? To which Kirk replies, Dr. Corby was never here. So the situation is resolved. We get our final scene, wonderful shot of the remastered Enterprise in all its glory, leaving orbit of XO3. We get that lovely reverse view on the view screen of them departing orbit. Spock is at his science station. Christine is on the bridge. Kirk sat in his command chair. Christine is talking to her, and she says, thank you for letting me make the decision, Captain. I'm sure that I'm doing the right thing. Kirk relays to Spock that she's staying with the ship, and then he looks at Spock and says, something bothering you, Mr. Spock? Spock then quite rightly says, frankly, Captain, I was dismayed by the use of your term half-breed, Captain. You must admit, it is an unsophisticated expression, to which Kirk replies, I'll remember that, Mr. Spock, the next time I find myself in a similar situation. Spock gives him a knowing glance, almost a smile. They exchange a look between each other. Kirk orders, steady as we go, helm. The view screen ahead. And so ends the episode with a final shot of the Enterprise. And we can see that this episode is directed by James Goldston. Now, we've seen James Goldston before already. He is someone who has directed other episodes of Star Trek. Only one, in fact, though. And he did the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before. So this would be his final outing in Star Trek. We wouldn't see him again. The music of this episode was composed by Fred Steiner. Alexander Courage getting recognition for the original theme, as usual, of course. We got our list of guest stars, Michael Strong and Sherry Jackson and Ted Cassidy. Michael Strong playing Dr. Corby, Sherry Jackson as Andrea, and Ted Cassidy as Rook. We also had Harry Bash as Brown. Quite a small cast in this episode, actually, and something quite notable in this episode is that we didn't have Dr. McCoy, and we didn't have Mr. Scott either. We also didn't have Mr. Sulu. At the very beginning of the episode, we saw two yellow-shirted extras at helm and navigation. Now, this episode on IMDb gets a 7.5. As I said at the start, it's got its moments. There are things on rewatching it and talking about it out loud here that I appreciate and I enjoy, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. So I think it's probably, I'm going to mark it down a bit from 7.5, and I'm going to take it down to a solid rounded down 7. And there you have it, my friends. Another one in the books. What Are Little Girls Made Of? Very, very relevant to what's going on in modern Star Trek right now. This plot ties in with a plot line that is very, very current. Some continuity errors, which annoy me. I know that most people are not so precious of canon these days as maybe my generation was and still is. I try and let go of canon sometimes. Writers will always say that they will never place canon before telling a good story. I do have some problems with that. I think it's quite lazy and quite disrespectful to a large audience that has been around, quite frankly, a lot longer than they have, many of these young writers. So they should have a bit more respect, is my opinion, for this franchise. But it's the times. I acknowledge it. It is what it is. What can we do? But yeah, definitely not one of my favorites. And we're going through a phase of a few episodes that really aren't my favorites. This is what I feel is a little bit of a lull in some episodes in season one. We've got this one, the next one is Dagger of the Mind, another one that I really don't care very much for. And then after that, one of the really worst episodes in season one called Miri, which I'm just really not looking forward to watching again. We pick up a bit after that with one called The Conscience of the King, which I really do like, and then we get into a really good phase of episodes after that for a while. So this is what any TV show is about, though, isn't it? Not just Star Trek. Ups and downs, good and bad, and hey, it's all about taste at the end of the day. What you like might not be what I like, and vice versa. But I notice something new every time I watch one of these episodes, even after all these years. Like you'll have just seen, I've only just realized that it was actually Corby who fired that phaser at the end and not Andrea. At least that's what I'm now perceiving. Let me know if you agree or don't agree with that. But with that being said, I'm going to wind up this episode now. I'm going to thank you for joining me. The reaction to this new channel has been really, really great. A lot of you are watching my shorts, which if you're doing so, please do click on the link to the main video, because I really would like the views on the longer form videos. But I appreciate all the attention the channel is getting. Please give me a like. Please hit the subscribe button. Please leave some comments. I've been getting loads of comments, which I'm really, really happy about. It's great that you want to engage with me, and long may that continue. With that all being said, let's wind things up for real, because I've already said I'm going to, but I didn't. And I will wish you a pleasant day wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I will encourage you to stay safe, travel well, take care of yourselves, and above all else, live well and prosper. Until next time, bye-bye.